I think, like we mentioned education, I think a lot of uh, uh, education is like that now.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, it's suboptimally uh, serving, its original purpose. There's a lot of bloat in there. There's a lot of, it keeps getting more and more expensive. Maybe you could say the same thing about healthcare too. Like, and there's a perspective that a lot of that, maybe not all of it, some of it is just supply and demand, but in the nature of what those industries, the requirements placed on them, but some of it might be the role of government in it too,
yeah.
where you have like a lot of regulations around both of those. Like if you want to be eligible for federal student loans, you have a lot of requirements you have to fulfill, and to be able to practice medicine or provide healthcare, you have to fulfill a lot of requirements as well.
Hmm.
And even if they're well intentioned, they is maybe especially if they're poorly implemented, they can really create a lot less efficiency, like cause a lot less efficiency,
Right.
um, and
I,
continue to raise costs. And then you can have like increased barrier to entry for new market participants. So
yeah.
then it drives down competition and innovation suffers.
I really feel that on the education front. And I think it's a number of factors. I don't think there's any one thing to point to, but I mean, at least when we were coming up, um, it was kind of this push that college is sort of the only option. Like you have to go do this if you want to be, have a successful life, or this is a requirement. You have to get a degree. And I do remember at the time, even people saying it does not matter what degree you get. Almost in some ways, like as long as you get that degree, then you can separate yourself from the pack in some ways, and that completely discounts an entire other career path, doing trade school. I mean, HVAC guys just print money these days. I mean, doing any of that kind of technical work that you might need an apprenticeship or something like that. I mean, you can make great money. um, but it's that blue collar work, even now, almost feels like it's looked down upon. And I don't know why necessarily. We've sort of sold this college dream to the American public at large. And then there's this push that, well, everybody needs to go to college. And so if everybody has a bachelor's degree, well, those are the people you're competing with in the marketplace for jobs. So if you're just raising the floor, essentially, unless you're going to specialize beyond that. And so because college was seen as the only path forward, and obviously everybody should go to college, and then the federal government steps in and says, well, of course, this is sort of like we talked about. We hit on this a little bit last week. Of course, we want to help people. Of course, we want everyone to be able to go to college. So we're going to guarantee these loans, and so that everybody can go to college. So that increases all this supply of money. And then if you're a college, well, I mean, the federal government is basically writing the check. So why would you not increase prices, right? I mean, there's incentive on the part of the institution, the academic institution, to continue to raise prices, and they have to compete with other institutions. So I honestly really dislike the whole system. I don't necessarily, at least when I reflect on my experience, it doesn't really feel conducive to actually learning. It's like a degree mill. They're just trying to push people through the system, collect their checks, give you a piece of paper, and then move on. Um, which is why, and at least in our industry, my experience has been almost nobody cares at all that I have a degree. They certainly don't care that I mean, I had dropped out of college and I went and got went to an online program and got a computer science degree. Nobody cares. Nobody has ever asked me about it in a professional setting, like in terms of interviewing me for a job, because they have work that needs to be done and they want people who can do the work. It doesn't matter in this sort of results oriented industry what your pedigree is in some way. And maybe that's short-sighted, based on this industry. I'm sure it's probably not like that in other industries, but man, it sucks. It sucks still that um, people might, in some cases, you won't even get looked at unless you have that degree, regardless of whether or not that actually means anything. Like it's almost just checking off a box for no reason other than this is the way it's always been done. So this is how we separate people.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of arbitrary, right? That regardless, pretty much of the field, you're required to spend 4 years studying it.
Right.
You know, and then also like if it's really about learning the skills needed for a particular domain, then why couldn't I mean maybe some skills are not as easily assessed, but and require more experience, but there could still be requirements for that, like having practicums or clinicals or whatever. But why can't you just like earn credits by like passing assessments?
Yeah.
Like real like thorough, rigorous tests or examinations. Like maybe not necessarily multiple choice. It could be like you have to like build something or write something or
Demonstrate proficiency in
yeah,
some way.
exactly. Why do you like why would you have to be to go through the motions of going through a class in order to show you have proficiency based on what's on your transcript versus just like there should be shortcuts basically. I don't even know if shortcut is the right word, but for somebody that can just pick up a book and like figure it out themselves and teach themselves the skills or like go online and learn through YouTube or whatever else, like it shouldn't really matter so much how you learn, just at the end of the day that you learn what you needed to.
Hmm.
And so I just think there's a huge opportunity for a more efficient approach to education, you know?
Well, I think what we tell ourselves is it's a liberal arts education. You need to be exposed to all these different parts of life and the world so that you can be a well-rounded person. Maybe that was true in 1975, but like these days, I mean, you can go on the internet, you can learn anything about anything for free. You just like you don't necessarily need to pique that curiosity in school because that was the only avenue essentially. Um, Nowadays, I think it's a lot different. And again, at least in our industry, in software, like it matters way more what you can actually do. Like why, if you think about spending 4 years studying computer science, and then you think about comparing that to 4 years of hands-on, like on the job training. I mean, there's almost no comparison. I learned so much more in my first 6 months working at my first real programming job than I ever did in school. Uh, But I mean, for better or for worse, that's the way it works. People want to see you struggle through it. I guess I don't know. It doesn't feel very good to me the way that it's set up today, and especially because we're the government's guaranteeing all those loans, but they don't try to encourage you into a career path that is actually in demand. It's whatever you want to do. If you want to go, you know, study 18th century literature, like great, like that's great interest, but then you have all these people that graduate and can't get a job anywhere. I mean, I have so many friends that have like a basic degree in something and then they end up working in something completely different. It has nothing at all to do with what their professional training is supposed to be because there aren't necessarily jobs for everybody in those things. So I would like to see maybe a shift in focus. And this is my own bias coming into play, I suppose, because our industry is very much, results oriented. What can you do for me? Can you get the work done? And less about the pedigree of what your education is. Actually, an interesting anecdote is when I was going through school and shortly after, I remember reading an article about programming that was the article was basically why can't new computer science grads program? Like they literally can't solve basic programming problems. Um, and there's this sticking point in the interview process to get that first job. And these kids come out of college and they have no idea how to accomplish anything. Maybe they have some theory, but it's a different beast to actually get your hands dirty and get in there and actually be productive and solve a problem, rather than just sort of esoterically reading about things. I mean, you got to actually code if you want to be a programmer. So, and I think to your point, the boot camp, I'm sure, is a great option for a lot of people, at least in the case of a 4-year degree. That 4-year degree has to have a curriculum. There has to be a path, about, you're going to do this class, and then you're going to take, 301 and 401, and here's what you're going to learn. And the way that technology moves, especially in this day and age, I mean, when I was going through, I was learning things that were not even close to relevant in the modern workplace. So if you want to be a web developer and you want to work in JavaScript, I mean, there's new JavaScript frameworks coming out all the time. I don't know how they deal with that at a 4-year institution where you have to have a set curriculum. There should be a focus, to me, on trying to see what's new, see what's going on. Are there better ways to do things, rather than my experience, which is basically, here's a bunch of old stuff that doesn't matter at all, but you have to work through these stupid problems so that we can give you a grade so you can get a degree. Doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, it just feels like the system is overly bloated and inefficient. There could be, it's probably a right for reform, right?
Yeah, one of those avenues. Well, yeah, to your point about the boot camp, like, that is sort of circumventing the process. It's tough, though, when you get the government involved, because schools have to be accredited, and there's all this regulation surrounding it. I mean, it's a big barrier to try to tear that down, even if it's done in a noble way, with good intentions. I mean,
well, I think the argument for accreditation is to ensure a certain standard or quality. But I've been through accredited programs, and they leave a lot to be desired. Like, I mean, I'm sure, nowhere's perfect, and a lot of times the grass is always greener elsewhere. But it seems like there's a real potential for that barrier to kind of act as like a protectionist vehicle or whatever, where there's less incentive, or maybe less ability, but certainly less incentive to like continue improving the program, make it more efficient, better serve students. Really focus on putting together the best curriculum that you can. Making things coherent, so like students aren't just thrown into a textbook and told to read 100 pages a night, and like there's no real way to absorb that much information. And a lot of that in the textbook is just repeated, like it's repeated in the actual text versus in the figures and the little sidebars. And it seems like stuff just keeps getting thrown on, and maybe in a lot of cases to check boxes.
Yeah.
But and every school is doing their own, like creating their own program, whereas they could pool resources together and like get the best of the best teachers and like really put together a curriculum that is like thoroughly coherent and efficient, and be a much better outcome.
Right.
And so maybe they could even shorten the length of a program, or keep it the same length, but like students that are graduating from it would be so much better informed or competent. There's a huge amount of waste in a lot of programs.
Yeah.
And, based anecdotally on the ones I've been through, like there's a lot to be desired.
And it can't just be the Wild West. We've seen this recently with for-profit colleges that have been shut down. I think like DeVry is one of them. there's the University of Phoenix ongoing things, and they're looked down upon. And in some cases, rightfully so. Some of them are legitimately scams trying to take your money and not educate you. But I think that serves as another barrier to, well, this is why we have to have accreditation, right? This is why you can't just have new players entering the market trying to be disruptive, because this is what you end up with. I think it's easy to point that finger. But I mean, the other side of the coin is, well, what do? We just sit with what we have forever, and like these are our institutions, and you can't ever challenge them. You're sitting on these putting these academic institutions on a pedestal and protecting them, possibly for the wrong reasons. So I don't know. When I've been in situations in my job where I am mentoring somebody, or I have junior guys underneath of me, I basically tell them, if we start getting on about education and this and that, I say, you gotta just go out there and just try things, experiment, watch a YouTube video, get an idea, play around with it. It doesn't matter what your academic pedigree is. Oh, you went to this school and you have. I've worked with people in the past who went to incredible schools, absolutely incredible schools, and I mean they couldn't solve a problem to save their life. Basically, I was on a panel interviewing people at one point, and we interviewed somebody from Harvard, and it was very clear from the beginning they were a complete disaster. It was not even close to being a good fit for the job. But there is that historical pressure that, well, if you have Harvard on your resume, I mean, surely you can get a job, or at least get an interview, get your foot in the door. So, and that to me, that's privileging, offering a privilege in a way that maybe doesn't make sense, at least in programming. And you look at the most successful people, the Bill Gates and Steve Jobs of the world. I mean, Bill Gates dropped out of Harvard. I don't see it as a requirement for sure. And I think we're in a lot of cases we're selling short the younger generations, telling them that sort of this is what you need to do, and then racking up ridiculous amounts of debt for doing it. And it's certainly not a promise of success.
Yeah, and it kind of feels antiquated too. Like, I mean, certainly you get a lot by being in person and having that like dorm room campus experience.
Yes.
But maybe there's other ways to do that too. Maybe you can like still like be working part time, or like there's got to be other options besides racking up tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands in debt to be able to go through that sort of like growing phase early in adulthood. But I mean, now because you can learn anything like so easily through the internet, it seems like having these massive campuses for in-person instruction for a lot of things just doesn't really make sense anymore.
I find it hilarious when prospective students are going to evaluate colleges, and what do you hear? Oh, I just love the campus. Oh, it's so beautiful. Well, yeah, you're going to pay for that. There's a reason that it's so beautiful, right? They're trying to attract you because they want your money. So, like, it would be better to try to find a fit that's almost a better fit intellectually. Like, who cares how many flowers they have on the quad? Like, what you want to take away from that is to be educated. But
Yeah.
it becomes like an attraction, like a theme park, trying to lure people in. And look how nice it is here. You'll have such a great time. Maybe it's the wrong message. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, probably depends what you want to get out of that experience too. Like, really the on the campus, college experience, and if you're willing to pay for it. It's just when it's so easy to get a loan and you're young and excited, and then you come out of that and struggling to pay off the loan for could be decades.
And somebody coming, unless you have a lot of guidance from your parents, and a lot of people don't have that option. I mean, are you really equipped at 18 to make a life-changing decision to take on, in some cases, $200,000 of debt, and then come out the other side with a degree that may or may not be worth anything? may or may not be able to find a job. I don't know. I think it'd probably do us some good to scrutinize that a little more carefully up front,
Yeah.
rather than take that on and have to deal with the burden that is the student loan crisis.